So when you walk down the pharmacy lotions and potions aisle, it's a really good indicator of our cultural attitudes toward aging. And when you see things like anti-aging, age killer lotion, I'm not kidding, that is actually the name of a little black bottle called Age Killer, about what our cultural attitudes about aging are. And it makes one really wonder about what is it that we're afraid of? What is that fear that Kent was talking about that keeps us from really living a full life as an older person? And I now have my benefitas with my, I'm finally entering a place where people are like, well, you're young, you don't know what we're talking about. I've been doing this work since I was 25. So it's been a long road to get here, and every time a gray hair would come in, I would celebrate so that I could cross into the threshold of legitimacy, I'll tell you. So when you research, when you do a Google search on fear of aging, you know what's really interesting? That's what comes up. It's all women. If you press fear of aging and image, that is the top search right there, captured. That doesn't mean that women are more afraid of aging than men. It means that that's what the culture assumes, right? And that's how it's marketed. The fear of aging is marketed according to gender. So those pharmacy aisles are very gendered. Now, I think, I've done some research in psychology. There's a psychological theory called terror management theory. I don't know, has anybody ever heard of that, terror management theory? My friend over here probably has. Terror management tells us that the reason we're afraid of aging is because it reminds us of our mortality. And as an animal, as a human animal, we're wired to not want to, for survival. So we don't want to think at all about dying. But I'll tell you what, if you dig into those research studies, the psychology professors who did those studies did them on their most convenient samples, which is who? College students. So that research is very age-based. And I can see with the trip down the pharmacy aisle or the age-segregated cultures that we live in which older people are very segregated from younger people, that they would be afraid of it. They wouldn't know how to deal with it. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about it. But if you do the same research and ask older people what they're afraid of, it's meaninglessness. We want to know that our lives have meaning. And to me, that's what's at the root of our fears of dementia. And to me, that's where I come in. And also, it's very gendered. If you Google search fear of meaninglessness and press image, this is what you get. All of these male philosophers who write about meaninglessness. It's really interesting how those two things were very gendered in that search. So to me, my work has become all about meaningfulness, especially because people assume that Alzheimer's, living with Alzheimer's and living with dementia, that your life, I think that's one of the crippling fears, is that suddenly it's going to become emptied of meaning and purpose and value. And that's the last thing that we want in our lives. But I've had 25 years now of working with people with dementia. And I'll tell you what, it's been some of the most meaningful work ever in my life. So I feel as though my work is now pushing that forward and letting people know that that time of life can become incredibly meaningful for everyone around the experience. So what does awe mean? When I say awe, and this comes back to the feeling of awe, what do I mean by that? So awe, an actual definition is from Piff, who's written a lot about this, is an emotional response to a perceptually vast stimuli that transcend current frames of reference. So it has two parts. One, you perceive a vastness. Two, it makes you change the way you think. In other words, it blows your mind. That's really sort of the synopsis of awe. Another version, a direct and initial experience or feeling when faced with something amazing, incomprehensible, or sublime. That comes from a really interesting book that I became obsessed with, and it's from 2015, called The Neurophenomenology of Awe and Wonder. It's an interdisciplinary research team that came together to study what happens to astronauts after they come back, having seen the world from afar. Wonder is the second part of it. It's a feeling of surprise mingled with admiration caused by something beautiful, unexpected, unfamiliar, or inexplicable. Or it's a desire or to be curious about something. So to me, wonder is a byproduct of awe. Awe comes first, and then you're wondering why, that the change in your frame of reference makes you pursue your curiosity. A reflective experience motivated when one is unable to put things into a familiar conceptual framework, awe, leading to open questions rather than conclusions. It opens you up to curiosity. You don't know. You're at the end of your knowledge. You move forward with curiosity and wonder. Really interesting research has just started to come out recently about awe and its impact on human experience and human life. Small doses of awe yield a boost in life satisfaction. You can tell that the research dates on this are no more than 2012. Awe inspires us to be good to others. Awe expands our sense of time, changes our decision-making, and improves well-being. Awe leads to humility, and humility is associated with better social relationships, increased altruism, greater well-being, and resilience. That's just 2017. Humility facilitates social integration. When you feel humbled in an experience of awe, whether it's something beautiful or terrifying, if you share an experience of a flood with your neighbors, you are all humbled by this incredible, overwhelming act of nature, and you come together. It is an act where you are all kind of level playing field, and it facilitates social integration and bonding. So meaningfulness, the research around meaningfulness, if our goal is to have meaningful lives, the research around meaningfulness is that there are two parts of it, and I use hands here as an example. So one part and another part that come together to create meaning. One is a subjective experience, what I think about what's happening, and the other is an objective experience. And the beautiful thing about awe is that because it triggers wonder and curiosity, that's the subjective experience. And because it triggers humility and social integration, that is the objective experience of working with people in a group and forming community outside of it. When you get those two together, that's when you get meaningfulness. Here's just my map of that, and it's really confusing. So I'm glad they printed it out on the paper for you. You can see it going off in two directions to get to meaningfulness. So I've really come to see all the work that I do in the arts, which is one of the avenues for experiencing awe, as facilitating experiences of awe for people in whose lives awe has been taken out. I have these things that I'll just go over briefly because they're kind of the core tenets of the work that I do with time slips for facilitating awe through what we call creative engagement, inviting someone into creative expression. One is improvisation. Is anyone here from theater or the arts know the core tenet of yes and? Yes and is the core of improvisation. And what that means is that you look around at the world around you and you observe what's happening, good, bad, whatever, and you say yes, and you add to it in a positive way. So if you've ever experienced kind of comedy improv, which is what most people understand improv to be, what happens is that someone will give you a suggestion, plumber and cue ball, or something, ask for two strange things. You say, all right, I'm going to be a plumber who plays pool, right? You say yes and. And this is a phenomenal approach. And it's really core to working with people with dementia, because you accept wherever they are at that moment, and you move with them positively. You don't try to correct or move them out of whatever emotional reality they're in. You accept, embrace, and move with it. Beautiful questions are questions that open a shared path of joint discovery. Again, in every one of these, what we're trying to do is not correct a person, but embrace where they are and encourage more expression. So beautiful questions, rather than be yes or no, or asking someone a question that has a right answer that they might not know, you ask a question that opens up the path to expression and meaningfulness with no right or wrong, right? So an example, we did a big project with Meals on Wheels, actually, where we sent out beautiful questions with meals for, I think, 45 weeks. It was almost a year. And we would ask questions like, what do you treasure in your home and why? What is a well-worn path in your home? What is a well-worn path outside your home? And what blocks your path? What's the most beautiful sound in the world? Questions that just kind of open up your curiosity and your sense of wonder. The next one is proof of listening. As a facilitator, your job becomes to make sure that you echo back what you're being heard. You're saying yes, right? Whatever the person is saying, you're giving them proof that they've been heard. And that can come from echoing what the person says, eye contact and gestural mirroring, writing down what they're saying and taking it seriously. Any of those techniques, there's a lot of different techniques to give proof of listening. Another one for me is rigor and value. And you'll see that in a lot of the work that I'm going to show you shortly, which is that to show someone that you value them, you treat their expression with value. So if you were ever going to frame something or put it on paper, what is the quality of the paper you're going to use? Where are you going to put that picture when you hang it up, and how will you frame it? You treat it like it's special because you want the person to feel special. So you add the rigor, and to me this is where the collaboration with professional artists comes in, because professional artists know how to do this. It doesn't have to be expensive, but they know how to frame literally, not literally, but figuratively frame artwork as valuable. The other key component to this is connection. And what I mean by connection is that it's somehow beyond the person. So when you create something together, you always have a part of it that's shared with the broader public in some way. And you can do this in a lot of different ways. A really great example of this, of reframing programming or activities, things to do together for meaningful experiences, was an example that came from a day program in Milwaukee. They talked about clipping coupons. That's often something that the Alzheimer's Association, on their list of 101 activities to do with people with dementia, clipping coupons is probably in the top 15. How do you make that meaningful? So the adult day program had them tell stories about the products, and they wrote the stories on beautiful pieces of paper, and they kind of cut it out nicely, and then they took the coupon and the story and some tape, and they went to a nearby grocery store. They found the product. They taped the story and the coupon to the product, and then they snuck away and left it as a gift to people who would come across it and say, here's a coupon, look at this story, this is so interesting. So it's connected somehow to the larger world for a sense of purpose and meaning. Arts in health settings are used traditionally in 3 ways. One of them is environmental. So that's what people think of when they pick paint colors that are soothing, or pipe in beautiful music, right, in the background, or have a gallery down the hallway, so really beautiful artwork on the walls. That tends to be passive, right? They may not have choice over that. It's enjoyable, but it's kind of passive. Entertainment or education is mostly what's out there. So someone will come in who's a beautiful musician, or maybe high school or college musicians, and play for people. And people gather and clap, and that was wonderful. And it's enriching, and we should have that. We should never stop that, because it's really delightful. But there's this third layer that I think we have just not tapped into, that is where meaningfulness can really be made. And that is the engagement and co-creation level. That's what I've been talking about. That engagement and co-creation level can happen at 3 levels. I have a lot of levels in my talk here. One is it can be totally infused into everyday moments. So if you're walking down the hallway with someone and you pass a window, you can use that window as a prompt. If the trees are moving, or what do you imagine you hear outside, or what does that remind you of, or anything you want to say. Anything can be a prompt. It can be part of everyday life. Programmatic is how we tend to think of it, and we structure activities in care settings. But then there's another way, which is if you combine everyday life and programmatic over time, you can actually transform a community. I've also been doing, and I'll address this pretty quickly and then wrap up, work with students. And I wanted to particularly talk about that here because we're in a university and because I think collaborating with the next generation of the workforce and of the next generation that is going to age is really important. And the three different types of student engagement that we've really worked on with time slips is volunteer work. And that's usually a semester long. At my university, at UWM, they put out a call every semester for students who want to learn creative storytelling. They come from all over the campus, every different discipline, and they take the online training. And then our Center for Community-Based Learning, Leadership, and Research coordinates sites for them to go out and practice the storytelling with people with dementia. Some of them are congregate care sites, some of them are memory cafes, informal gatherings of people, senior centers, wherever they're going, meal sites. Then at the end of that semester, they hold a little tiny celebration where they share the stories that came out as a gift back to the elders. The second one is when it's embedded in coursework. So there was a communication disorders class at UWM that just embedded this as service learning inside their semester-long class. So it was much more geared toward the reading list was all about dementia. It's just like a deeper dive into it, and it's similar to the structure of the volunteer program, but it's embedded into a specific class. And then the final one is one that I'm most excited about, which we're now in our 5th year on at UWM. We have about 5 student artists in residence who are who are artists from any area in the Peck School of the Arts: music, film, dance, visual art, and theater. They get room and board to live in a care community, become members of that community, have a mentor who's an older person and a mentor who's a staff person. Together, after about 2 months of just learning who people are and what the organization is and what the community is like, they articulate a goal for their work for the year. And then they work on that goal with their arts workshops. And then at the end of the year, we hold a celebration at that site and also a shared celebration across all the sites called the Flourish Festival. I close with this image by just for contemplation, by an artist out of Barcelona who I met. She's a volunteer, actually, in a long-term care community in Spain. And I asked her, I love her illustrations, and I asked her if she could illustrate this moment of shared wonder and imagination. And this is what she created. Thank you, guys.